Good morning, it's Sally from Heaven of Devon. Thought I'd give you a little update again on the planning enforcement issue. So last time, a couple of weeks ago, I gave you a little update about what was happening with the neighbours and the cameras being stolen, etc. So now I've heard back from the planning enforcement officer. So I sent an email, it's been ongoing since like September, October, I think October last year. Last correspondence I had was I sent an email in February just with some outstanding questions. Hadn't heard anything back. So I just assumed the case had been closed because that's happened previously. And now, out of the blue, I've had an email from the planning enforcement lead officer chasing up what's happening. So the planning enforcement letter that we received last year was to do with storage of vehicles and agricultural land. So that's been ongoing. I've asked questions to and from, haven't had a response, like I said, since February, so nearly 4 months. We're now in June, so it's been about 4 months waiting for a response, and now I'm being chased and I have 7 days to reply. Anyway, it's all okay, and now in addition to that, so the first one was storage of vehicles, and now there's a new planning enforcement inquiry as well regards to hard standing, which is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with hard standing. So with the storage of vehicles, you can store vehicles and agricultural land providing that they're being used for agricultural purposes. So the question that I've got is the vans. So there were 2 vans parked here. There was an Iveco camper van, and you can see the Mercedes Sprinter, which is still there, and this car, which is a Rolls-Royce undercar covered under tarpaulin. Now, quite clearly, there is no way that car is being used for agricultural purposes. Like, there's no question mark about that. So that, I understand that completely. The camper van we sold anyway, and there is also down here I don't know if you can see it, a full transit minibus, which was being used as a day bus, making cups of tea and somewhere to sit in the dry while we're repairing the buildings. Now that the kind of like buildings are being repaired, our intention was to sell it anyway, so that's actually just been put up for sale. But technically that's fine, it can stay there because we are using it for agricultural purposes, because you're allowed like a welfare unit. The camper van, the camper van, the van and the car, my argument is this section of land here is not agricultural. So it's really small, I'll just show you. Like, it's literally from where I put the fence up, that concrete fence, to the bank. Really, really small parcel of land. And my argument with this is that it's never been used for agricultural purposes because there used to be an old septic tank on the land. I'll explain a little bit more. So this is the site where the gravel is. And there were some inlet pipes there. So the site where that gravel is used to be the old septic tank that served 2 domestic properties, neither of which had any agricultural occupancy ties to them, therefore domestic. The area that I'm walking around now was all the drainage field for the said septic tank. We disbanded the septic tank a couple of years ago now. It's been used as a septic tank for 50 plus years, hence why we had to get rid of it, because it was broken, it was disgusting, the sewage was bubbling up, flooded out from the bridle path, etc. So now the ruling is, if something's been, so for a change of use, technically you have to put in planning permission for a change of use. But the ruling is, if it's been used for more than 10 years and you can prove that, prior to any action being taken, you don't have to submit planning, it's exempt from planning enforcement. So technically, this area here is exempt from planning enforcement because it's been used for more than 10 years as non-agricultural land. The question mark is, what kind of classification of land would you need to submit? What would it be? So I think it would be amenity land. So that technically would be fine. But at the moment, the Rolls-Royce we're planning to sell anyway. That was always our intention. So I'll try and sell that, get that shifted. And the Mercedes van has got the 4G camera attached to it for security, and I can shove some animal feed in there as well. So technically it's been used for agricultural, so it's a bit like, do you want to go down the road of questioning, is it agricultural, is it non-agricultural land for this small section of land, or do you just go, look, do you know what, roller's going to be sold, the van's being used for agricultural purposes anyway, so it's kind of like It's one of those. So the other thing now that's sprung up is the hard standing. So there are two rulings for agricultural land. One is 5 hectares or more. That gives you more exemption from planning. So if you've got 5 hectares or more, which is about 12.4 acres, you're allowed a lot more in terms of permitted development. So you're allowed to erect barns, etc., providing they're used for agricultural purposes, without having to go through the rigmarole of the full planning process. Technically, you're supposed to submit a permitted development report to the local council just to advise them of the works that you're carrying out, but you don't need planning. Now, if you've got under 5 hectares, which is what the case is here, there is different rulings. So if you've got over 5 hectares, there's one set of rules. Under 5 hectares, another set of rules. So this is under the 5 hectare ruling, which is 5-ish acres. So it comes under that ruling. But under Class B permitted development, you are allowed the provision of a private way. So you're allowed to the rearrangement or replacement of a private way, which comes under Class B Section D, if I'm correct, and the provision of a hard surface. So the wording in the legislation is provision of a hard surface is under hard surface is under Class B Section E. Now, all of which has to be for the reasonable, now what's the technicality of the wording? So within the reasonable necessary requirements for the use of agricultural. So for instance, if I was to put hard standing up through the field, is that really reasonable? Do I really need it to gain access to the top field for agricultural purposes? No, because a tractor can quite willingly go up there, so that wouldn't be reasonable. Now, the hard standing that I've put down here by this gateway, so it's a small piece of hard surface, I can't say the word, which will be deemed as reasonable necessary for the purposes of agricultural, because it's coming off the bridle way. You can pull in here with your tractor and your trailer. There's enough room to park up here and leave it there on a hard surface, so it isn't, it doesn't get muddied up, doesn't get churned up, etc. in the bad weather. So that's absolutely fine. Now, I haven't spoken to the planning enforcement officer in terms of what hard standing is being questioned, but I can probably guess. So the other entrance to the property comes off the main road, and there's always been a bit of hard surface there. We've just replenished it. And the courtyard in front of the stables, that's always had a hard surface there. We've not even replenished that one yet, but we will do at some point. So I think what they're actually questioning is this section of hard surface here. You can see. Which at the moment it does look a bit untidy, but that's what you get when you're repairing and carrying out building works. So I'm just going to walk you along. Don's doing some planing. Let's walk away. So I think that's the hard standing that they're questioning. But again, that would be reasonably necessary for the purpose of agricultural, or it could technically come under engineering works. Because, just to walk you down, so technically it comes under 2 operations. So you're allowed engineering works on agricultural land, and we've done some engineering work because we've created a retaining wall. The hard standing that I've just shown you is actually part of the whole drainage system, or it could technically come under the provision of hard standing because it's reasonably necessary as part of an agricultural unit. So I'm going to reply to the planning enforcement officer. He wants a site visit, but I'm going to see if I can just have a telephone conversation with him instead to try and resolve the issue. And hopefully we'll get it resolved once and for all. So there's a lot of rules and regulations in terms of planning, but one I bet you didn't know was that you don't actually need planning permission for anything. So anything you want to build, anything you want to create, build, construct, you don't actually technically need to submit planning permission. It's not a requirement in law. However, if you do decide to go ahead and build your garage in your back garden or your barn or whatever it may be, if one of your lovely neighbours decides to complain and put a planning enforcement request in, and the planning enforcement officer comes round and thinks there's any necessary harm that's being done to the local area, they may ask you to take it down. That's only a maybe. So the planning enforcement officer can't just come along and slap a notice on you for no reason. He has to define what the harm has occurred. So for instance, if you've got a really small back garden and you decided that you're just going to plaster the whole back garden, you're going to whack a great big building on it, that would be harm to the local environment. Now, if there is no harm occurring and you've built it without planning permission and the planning enforcement officer agrees with you, then they don't actually need to put a notice on you. So for construction, if you've built something and no action's been taken, so if you've built something without planning permission and no enforcement action's been taken within a period of 4 years, you're exempt from planning, except if you're a listed building. If you're a listed building, completely different set of rules once again. But if you've just built something, you're not in a conservation area, you're not in a site of special scientific interest, etc. There's no other kind of regulations on that piece of land that you're using. It's just a standard area. You've built something without planning. You've had no action within 4 years. You can prove that it has to be substantially finished for the 4-year rule to start kicking in. And then after the 4 years, you're exempt from planning. If you, for instance, like mine, I want to do a change of use for a piece of land, so there's no building, there's no construction there, but I want to argue that it's actually not agricultural land, it's amenity land, that rule is 10 years. So again, it has to be 10 years when the change of use has significantly happened. So in that instance, it would be when the septic tank was installed, and when it was a drainage field, and when no grazing of animals or etc., or cutting of the grass to bale it, whatever that may be in that area. And then the 10-year rule would start rolling from there, and then after 10 years, you're exempt from planning. So a little tip for you there. Yeah, so there you go. So that's a little update on the planning enforcement notice. So I'm going to reply to the officer, see what he has to say, and hopefully get the case closed down after what's been going on for nearly 8-9 months now, which has been a bit of a faff, but that's what you get when you get vindictive neighbours next to you. So yeah, so there you go. Little update on planning enforcement. Hope you found that useful. I'll do another little video at some point and just give you some more tips and hints about planning, what the rules and regulations are. I know a little bit, no expert. You know, I would always advise anyone speaking to a planning expert before you actually go ahead and do anything, but I can give you some guidance if you find that helpful. All right, thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the little update, and we'll see you again soon.